The following is a conversation with Dr. Erik Goodwyn. Erik is a practicing psychiatrist with a background in neurobiology. He's written books on the neurobiology of the gods, on dreams, on archetypes, and this year he published his first fantasy novel, which won the Literary Titan Golden Book Award. So really multifaceted and interesting guest. He's a major figure in the modern Jungian scene. He's the co-editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Jungian Studies. He's given talks across the world in all the major Jungian hotspots, from New York to Zurich to Ireland. He was actually wearing I didn't notice it till I was editing, but he was wearing an Ireland jumper, which was a nice homage. But yeah, we got into some really interesting ground here. Erik knows a lot about dreams, was able to answer some of my questions that no one else has been able to answer about dreams, so it's really fascinating for me getting into that, and I hope we can have many more conversations in future, because I feel like we barely skimmed the surface of what we could have talked about here. I'll put a link to Erik's website down in the description, where you can find all his non-fiction books and fiction books, and as well as links to him on other podcasts. And I'll link to his YouTube channel, The Imaginarium, where he talks about all things Jungian psychology and fantasy. Erik, welcome. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate your time. You're in Wyoming?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, when you said mountain time originally, I was like, is this... I didn't realize there was a time zone called mountain time, so I was like, that's cool.
Right.
Yeah, because you kind of mentioned that you were writing. All right, no, I don't think you mentioned you were writing fantasy. I think I went off and found your Goodreads page, and I was like, fantasy. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, mountain time seems like a good place for someone who's into fantasy to be living in. And then I was like, oh,
Misty Mountains.
It's just what they call it in Wyoming.
Yeah.
But so you've written, is it one fantasy book you've written?
So far, it's the first of a series, but yes. In fact,
how big is this? What is the scope of this series going to be, I wonder?
So this is it. Dun, dun, dun.
The King of the Forgotten. That must be so satisfying to have your own, the toil and sweat and blood in physical form in front of you.
Oh yeah, of course. And it's a different animal than the nonfiction, because I've got plenty of that published, but fiction is very different, because you can't just talk about stuff that's science and and all that. You actually have to make it interesting and entertaining, and that's a lot harder. Yeah,
you can't just have like a thin thing of it can't just be exposition and then just a little bit of story dotting on top. It needs to actually be interesting. Yeah. And is that something you've always wanted to do, or did that just really?
Since I was a kid, This is, you asked a minute ago, this is the first of nine books. Okay, yeah, I've got it all planned out. I've had it in my head for years and years, so I'm finally getting to write them here in my 50s. So
that's cool. So I was watching some of Brandon Sanderson's lecture series on writing fantasy, and he talks about, I think it was actually George R. R. Martin's distinction between the gardeners and the architects. Are you a gardener or are you an architect?
Yes.
Which camp do you fall into? So let's say the architect plans everything out in advance, right? And they know what's happening in book 9 before, in book 1, whereas the gardener's kind of like, I'll fumble along here and see where I get.
Well, I'm being cute actually by saying yes. I think that's...
So you did understand. I was like, is he sidestepping it, or what's going on?
It's a bit of a false dichotomy, in my opinion. I think that every writer is a bit of both, and it's probably more to do with whether or not you kind of lean one way or the other, or where you start the process. So for me, I have a big outline, but half of it might get scrapped in the process of writing it, because I find, this is going a different direction. Let's see where that goes. So everybody's got a little bit of gardener and a little bit of the architect, I think.
Which even Sanderson is the grand architect. I don't know, have you read a lot of Sanderson?
I wouldn't say a lot. I have read Mistborn, and I read The Way of Kings.
Oh yeah. So
there's more of his books on my TBR list.
There's a lot of his books, and I spent an awful lot of time reading him last year. I'd read what's the series The Way of Kings is in? What is the series The Way of Kings?
Stormlight.
Stormlight Archive. Yeah, I read the first 4 books in I just a fever I had to get out of me, which I get with fantasy sometimes. And then I knew Wind and Truth was coming out last year, so I was like, I just read everything in the Cosmere, and I was like, this is a crazy undertaking, but yeah, so there's a point in that story where there's a character in Stormlight, Adolin, and Sanderson said he changed his arc.
Yeah.
It kind of ended up as a gardener thing in the middle, and I was like, oh yeah, so obviously it is a continuum with Patrick Rothfuss way over there on one side probably, or maybe George R. R. Martin, and then
both of those two are guilty.
Yeah, and Sanderson maybe over on the other side.
Yeah.
So where do you think you fall in that spectrum? Are you obviously it's going to be 9 books, or are you more towards do you lean architect?
Yes, I would say that I do. I lean more that direction. I've got the series planned out and the major plot elements planned out, but things could change, and they almost always do. Because
that's cool.
And now part of this is that I already have 2 at this point now with my first book. I've got 3 of the series already written. I've got 1, 4,
right.
1, 4, and 6 are already written.
Oh, so it's 3 trilogies?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
But it's still it's all one story, but it's got 3 parts of 3 to kind of separate it out.
And different characters in all 3 trilogies?
There are, but there's also ones that are in all of them as well.
That's cool. So what I kind of wanted to ask you was, so I know you've written some papers on dreams. You're very interested in dreams as well. And earlier this year, I made a couple cinematic kind of videos, and it was just a very, very visually creative thing, much more so than anything I've made before. And I found that during that process, I had this arc of dreams that began with the very beginning of the process, deciding to make the video, and ended 2 days before I finished editing. And the same thing, once I started the second video, crazy dream started, and again 2 or 3 days before the end. Did you have anything like that with writing this book? Was there an interplay with the dreams that you noticed, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Over the years, you'll notice different, whatever it is that you're doing, will be reflected in your dreaming, because, I think people have this idea that dreams are just sort of completely random, but it's not at all. It's not at all random. And when you're in a state of heightened creativity, usually triggered by some kind of need, your default mode network, if you will, starts to crank up in intensity, and you'll get more of that. It happens in therapy all the time too. Therapy is extremely creative process, because you're trying to go in and reorganize yourself. And so the dreams that are in therapy are, there's a couple of them that are so common that it's almost like a cliche. You're going to have a dream about looking after a child. This is super common in therapy. And the child has got some kind of mystical background that it's not necessarily you, but they're kind of distantly related to you somehow. And it's really just an expression of the divine child archetype, where you're called upon to look after this child, and there's some peril involved that you have to protect them from. And I've seen all kinds of variations of this, and I had it myself when I was in therapy too.
That's really
so. I mean, that's just one example.
That's a common therapeutic trope.
Yeah, it's one example of that.
So there was an interesting turn of phrase you had in there about necessity. Now I don't know whether that. Can you elaborate on that? Now I think you were saying it in the context of the creative process, but then you kind of went on to talk about the therapeutic process.
Yeah. So the dreams respond to our current life situations by trying to organize the massive amount of sensory information that we get and memory into a coherent story. It's an as-if narrative. So this is in one of my books, Understanding Dreams and Spontaneous Imagery. I teach what I call the number 1 dream hack method, which is, if you're trying to figure out what a dream is, you take the content of it and call it X, say, and you put it into this sentence. As my life is proceeding as if X. It's a quick and easy way to try to get at what the dream is about. Now, I won't give you all the answers, because that's a challenging process. One of the reasons why it's so challenging is because a dream is an irreducible construct. You might be able to break it down to a degree, but it's because it's such a metaphorical expression,
It's inexhaustible.
It's inexhaustible, right? And lots of Jungians talk about that, and Jung talked about it himself. But there's not been a whole lot of talk about, well, why is it so inexhaustible? And in my own work, I talk about why I'm thinking that it is, and it's because of the fact that it's a metaphor. And metaphors, if you look in like cognitive linguistics and metaphor theory, they say that right out, that as near as we can tell, metaphors can only ever really be re-expressed in terms of other metaphors. There's some ineffable core of meaning in them. Well, the psyche uses that to bring a whole lot of data together and to say it's as if this is happening. So while we're dreaming, not only are we consolidating memory, we're also constructing these as if narratives. So the memory tells us, okay, more or less, this is what happened to me. But the dream says, this is what it means. It means it's like this. Right. So if I'm going through a particularly tough time, if I've got trauma, if I've got grief, if I've got separation, whatever it is, maybe major phase of life, like coming of age or getting ready to get married or, having a child, all of this kind of stuff will trigger dream responses, some of which you'll see that are just so common around the world that we call them archetypes. Yeah. So that's what I meant by necessity.
So I'm wondering, like, with the creative process, though, it seems like something so otiose is probably the wrong word. It's a sort of is it a crisis? Is creativity a crisis that should precipitate a sequence of dreams?
I don't know if crisis is necessarily the right word. It can be, but if you look at the way that psyche operates and the amount of creative output, there's generally, if you're looking at dreams, say, you're going to see, generally speaking, two states. And one state is the crisis mode, where I've got, say, PTSD is a classic example of this. I have a horrible trauma, and I start having these repetitive nightmares about it. That's a great example of being in crisis mode at the very far extreme. Because the psyche is so challenged by the trauma, it's obsessed with it. It's constantly going back over and over the trauma over and over and over again. So you see this in PTSD, for example. On the other hand, it's kind of like if my life is going pretty good and I'm kind of in a chill state, then I won't have those kind of dreams. They'll be much more playful. They'll be more exploratory. They'll be, well, let's throw this together with that to see what that's all about, So it's a lot more loosey-goosey, which gives you this really weird experience in therapy where as a person gets better, their dreams get harder to interpret because they're more expansive and the scope is broadened. But as you can tell, though, the main impulse behind both processes is the same, and it's trying to make sense of my life. So brains have a really tough job to do. They have to take monstrous amounts of information, sensory info, and put it together in some way that says, I need to kind of maybe do this so I don't, die.
Yeah, it's I guess, because I found that function of dreams as to do with memory quite peculiar, because it seems to me like dreams are more prospective of like they're metaphorically trying to track forward or extrapolate current trends and be like, oh, could this, like as you say, an as if narrative. So how that is, because I guess the classic neuroscientific point of view, and I don't know if this is still the standard view, but that it's just about consolidating memory in the hippocampus or something like that, and this is just an epiphenomenal kind of like, dreams are an epiphenomenal fart on top of that brain function, which is doing something proper, if that makes sense. Whereas, I mean, once you've played around in the playground of dreams at all, you're kind of like, oh, this isn't just a thing about memory. This is a very strange thing going on here.
It's way more than that. Now, they're right in the sense that it is one of the functions. It's about consolidating a narrative in metaphorical terms that encapsulates how my life is going right now, and it serves a number of different functions. And this is not just dreams. This is spontaneous thought in general. So dreams are just sudden bursts of insight or visions, or you can even go into like psychedelics and that force you into this state. where I'm trying to say, okay, so what is happening right now? What do I need to orient towards? Da 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 da. So that's the forward-looking piece of it. But in order to really do that well, I also need to know, well, how did I get here? So that's the memory consolidation piece. So I think what early neuroscience of dreaming found, like Alan Hobson and those guys, Robert Stickgold, these are guys that discovered that is a big piece of it. And it goes even farther back because the connection between REM sleep and memory. They did find that is true. And there's some interesting wrinkles in that, but that's going down into the weeds. But anyway, as the brain does this, though, it also needs to figure out through abductive reasoning, which would be inferential reasoning, based on limited information, what might happen. So that's the future planning part of it. But it's got other things too that have been talked about for many years by like Kramer, Glucksman, names like that. Emotional regulation is a piece that all kinds of empirical research has demonstrated that too. If you inhibit dreaming processing, it seems to cause more difficulty in emotional regulation, interestingly enough. So you've got identity formation, emotional regulation, current planning for the future planning, as well as memory consolidation. So I think I may have mentioned that one already. But anyway, you get the idea. It's got a number of...
Ironically.
Yeah, you've got a number of processes.
Interestingly, you also mentioned the default mode network a few minutes ago. I wonder, because I'm familiar, I've read a lot about the default mode network in other contexts, but not in the context of dreaming. Is there a connection with dreams and the default mode network?
Yes, it's more active during dreaming. Pretty simple.
And the default mode network is very much about... So the way I remember it is, if you're not doing anything in your waking life, and that's when your default mode network kicks on, or when you're doing self-reflective activities.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of things that trigger that, and whether, I guess, that's mostly where your mind's going to go when you're tuned out of other things.
Right.
Do you think that that's connected in with what dreams are doing with the default mode network, or why that's active?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got three major networks. You've got the executive functioning network, the salience network, which is like keeping an eye on the environment and asking, is this important or can I disregard that? That's the whole network organized around that activity. And then you've got the default mode network. What the default mode network does, it fluctuates as if I'm working on a specific project consciously, then it's down modulated, and the executive control network is up modulated because I've got a lot of stuff I'm sorting through in conscious awareness. On the other hand, if I'm just sitting there vibing and not really paying attention to what's going on, or maybe I'm driving and it's on autopilot for the most part, then the default mode network kicks in. Well, what is that? Well, the default mode network's job is to take all of the info that has been flooding it for the last several days to a week, say, or really your entire life in bits and super important pieces, and reorganize it. Makes like, what the heck is really going on here? What is this really all about? So it's doing a lot of really important work, and it's really cranked up during dreams. And if you think about it, this actually makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary point of view, because brains have a tough job. They've got to figure out what all the information means for me. So it's a meaning-making process. That's like the number one. But if I'm busy, doing some kind of task, then I've only got so much processing power to allocate towards that. So I'm not going to be able to do as much of that while I'm working on some task. Versus if I'm asleep, I don't have any task going on. I'm just conked out. So the default mode network is like, yes, now we get to really work and put the pieces together and make sense of life up to today.
Yeah.
Up to today, anyway.
So what, do you know what that makes me think is, so I think about Nietzsche's creative process, right? And I kind of experienced this walking, I walked the Camino de Santiago, which is maybe a 700-kilometer pilgrimage trail across the north of Spain. And it's a big thing now, but I took 5 weeks, but there was a week in there, the second week, where I was just walking completely alone and hadn't really formed a lot of social connections at that point. So my alcohol intake and my social intake were pretty low. So I was like, okay. And I just found out there for hours a day walking. And I was doing a thing of no input. I like to do this on long distance hikes, of like having not listening to music, not reading anything, just letting the mind be.
Yeah.
And by the second week, I think what it took was my mind settling down, but I just found these aphoristic things starting to pour out of me. And with these hikes, it's glorious because there's a coffee shop, every couple of hours. So I'd get there, I'd write it down, I'd unpack this whole thought, and then I'd set off again. And just, oh, look, there's the beautiful wheat. That was a lovely croissant I had. What are we going to have now for lunch? And then I'd be walking along and then bang, another thing would erupt. And what I found was it was connections forming. I'd been studying Turner's anthropological work.
Sure, Victor Turner.
Maybe some semiotics, a few different things. And they were just beginning to bridge together. Yeah. So I had like a connection between Heidegger and Turner coming together. And I was like, oh, this is really fascinating. And then Girard was kind of coming in. And I just found what my mind was doing was kind of knitting these things together. And I realized that this is how Nietzsche said, by the end, he was just going out walking 12 hours. No, not at the end, when he was, fell down hugging a horse or whatever, allegedly. Yeah. But he was walking more and more, like up to 12 hours a day in Sils Maria in the Alps. And the aphorisms were just pouring out of him. And then he'd spend his winters kind of organizing it. And so I guess I'm just wondering, with that connection of giving the mind so much time to be in the default mode network, I wonder, is there can we connect that to creative processes on the one hand, but also another kind of empirical scientist part of me wants to go, would that have an effect on how much sleep you need to have, or on the nature, the type of dreams that you'll have if you're having this creative faucet open over here? Is there going to be less over here? A couple of random directions to go with that, but
yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure what the answer to that would be, but I can say though that what you're talking about makes a lot of sense, where you're taking a deliberate act to give your brain space to do all that knitting, and it can't just magically do it automatically. There's got to be time and space for it to do that work. So that's where kind of self-care and all that kind of comes into play. We tend to think of the mind as just a sort of thing that floats around in the void, but it's got physical connections and there's a physicality to it too. And so what you're doing, when you were doing that, was basically what I'm talking about, giving the brain the space to knit together the pieces, and you weren't having to process any major traumas or anything like that. So that you were in exploration and play mode. And you can see how important that is. It sounds like maybe frivolous, but it's not. It's not. That's when you get some of the great thoughts coming together to.
Yeah, I think there's something in that space of just allowing. And I think that's kind of what I was doing with making the videos earlier in the year, because I was, I guess, kind of dissolving. So the first video was about beauty, and it was, the opening line was something like, the great poets and philosophers talk about the good, the true, and the beautiful. And I've always been concerned with the good and the true, but maybe I've overlooked the most important one. And so it was like this perfect intro to being able to make a very aesthetically, artistic-y kind of piece of work. But what I found peculiar in that with the dreams was that they were in conversation. So I only noticed maybe it took me maybe 6 weeks to 2 months to make the video. I noticed about 3 weeks in, maybe 4 weeks in, I was like, I'm having a lot of dreams on alien planets, and there's these wars, there's these conflicts. And I was like, I must go back and do a study, because I've studied sequences of dreams in the past, and at this one I was like, okay, there's something going on here. I write down my dreams every night, as well as having a diary so I can cross-reference them. So I went through, and then I kind of threw all the dreams from the previous weeks out, and I just started mapping out the themes, and I was like, oh yeah, we're having a lot of things on Mars, like or just Nazis in the basement of this new settlement on Mars trying to destroy us. And then another dream where there's other settlers, the ancient Martian civilization that's actually still there. And And then other ones were just a portal to another world, and other ones and the very first dream was like flying a spaceship. But what I found was that most of the dreams were almost like snippets, not snippets, but they weren't whole unto themselves, if that makes sense. Whereas once I traced it back, I was like, oh, this dream has like all of the themes.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is ground zero. This is the first dream. And it followed like Jung's pattern of the having the different stages and having this lysis and this denouement at the end, which kind of pointed the way forward and kind of, I guess, talked about what the process ended up being over the next couple of months. Whereas the other dreams seemed like, hey, let's take that theme and let's develop that and let's play with that. And it seemed like it was taking parts of a certain central problem and exploring it, whereas that first dream seemed to be like, oh, we've got the whole thing here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've experienced that is that, that's a common experience?
Yes. I give a class at the University of Louisville. I'm an adjunct professor there where I used to work there full time, but they kept me on because I was offering, free teaching. So anyway, I teach.
Always a sweet deal.
Always a sweet deal for them. Yeah. So, I mean, I give a class on dream interpretation to them and they love it. The residents absolutely love it. And you can see that in the series that I present, where the very first dream has all the main components in it. And then the rest of them are basically variations on the themes to try to nail down more detail and try to get it more fully expressed. Because like the first one's, it's got all the themes there, but it's in more abstract terms, and so as they go forward, there's more little squiggly lines and details on it that tell you more about it. So that's essentially the core of what we're talking about here, is that the dreams take inner complexities and map them onto visual, spatial, like concrete maps of like stories. Right. So if I've got a conflict between, say, this was a man traumatized by war, and on one hand, he was feeling like he should just be tough and not worry about it. And on the other hand, he was feeling very vulnerable and scared and attacked and all that kind of stuff. Well, he had a dream that basically showed that entire thing right there. Well, so what's going on here? Well, it's taking that inner conflict, which is nebulous and difficult to really articulate, and saying it's as if I'm at war with these two other people. I'm stuck in between these two people. One of them's telling me to beat up the other guy, and the other guy's like in a wheelchair, and and I'm stuck in the middle, and this is really rough. So, but you can see how it's doing that. So the psyche is doing that, and it does this because it facilitates memory consolidation and emotional regulation, future planning, identity formation. All of that stuff is what those spontaneous thoughts are obsessed with. And you can also see this even in psychosis, when the frontal lobe is basically Swiss cheese for whatever reason. Like maybe they're, high on meth, or they're schizophrenic, or, who knows, brain damage, whatever. This process still carries on, just like it did before. Only the frontal lobe, or the ego consciousness, can't make sense of it as a metaphor and takes it literally.
In waking life?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I guess in the dream, your dream ego is always taking it as...
And the dream ego takes it literally, but then you wake up and you reflect on it and you're like, oh, okay, so that's what's really going on here. And I'm not sure... I think it's very helpful to use dreams in therapy, because you can tie the ego back into the process and get the two working together, the ego and the unconscious working together. But I think that the process that the unconscious is doing will work either way. Even if you don't analyze your dreams, it's still working towards healing and integration. It's just faster if you do it the therapy way.
So you think you are bringing a catalyst to the process by looking at the dreams?
Yeah. As a therapist, I don't fix people. What I do is I facilitate their own inner healing mechanisms to work more efficiently and more effectively. And Jung talks about this. He talks about how the alchemists would say that all of the elements want to be gold eventually, where the alchemist is speeding it along. All right, and then he, of course, likened that to the psychological process in metaphor, that alchemy was just a metaphor for these naturally occurring process. And a lot of my academic work is showing how exactly why that's true and why it works.
So I'm curious because it wasn't just the first dream that had a kind of there was also an end to the dreams, which was quite interesting. That there was a conclusion where, after all these conflicts with aliens and different planets, 3 dreams on the last night, and one of them, this flying saucer arrived, and we were like, oh no, it's nighttime, flying saucer arrives, we're like, it's game over. Aliens come down, they're like, hey, are you using the oceans? And we were like, what? No. They were like, do you mind if we were like, go for it. So they set up this outpost connecting us into this grander cosmic civilization. And I remember in the dream saying to my mom, imagine what fruits they have that we've never tasted. This is going to be wonderful. So there was that. There was another dream where, so the second one, I'm having it's almost like an anima connection with the alien. And she's an orange floating monkey type of creature. I can't remember exactly what she looks like, but me and my brothers were having this conversation, and I was like, oh, I'm feeling like the romantic vibe here, like the anima kind of energy coming up. And then it was like, oh, I gotta go to bed, because we're human and all that. And she was like, I don't need to sleep. I'm gonna keep plowing on. And then in the third dream, chatting to like this curator in a Berlin museum, and he's like, oh, it's one alien with like millions of bodies working all over the planet.
All is one.
Yeah, and I was like, why did it end there? Because I don't think there was any dreams after that until the next sequence of dreams, which I think picked up the alien thing, but it was slightly different. But it was a very peculiar denouement, where it was almost like the bookends of this creative process. And that's why I was curious if you'd had anything like that with the fantasy writing. But I guess this is happening over such a period of time for you that maybe it wouldn't be that focused.
Well, I mean, there's, generally speaking, when the psyche is working on a particular problem, once it figures it out, it stops working on it because there's plenty of other problems to work on. There's always something new going on, right? And I've seen that multiple times too. Like the one that I was telling you about just a minute ago, there was a final one and near the final session. Now I'm sure, obviously, because he's a normal person, that he continued to dream after this. But that last one that was mentioned in therapy definitely seemed to put the final, rubber stamp on the whole process, which is what you want. Generally, if you're having a patient who comes in and has a repetitive dream or a theme it's obviously orbiting the same thing over and over and over again, it means that the psyche is really wanting to figure this out. And so it tries all kinds of different approaches until it figures it out. Now, use therapists. If I say, I think your dream means this, if you're right, they'll stop dreaming about it. And then and that's all. And people will be like, "Wow, that's like magic," Like, no.
But is there often another dream in response to that?
Sometimes.
Or is it can it often be? Yeah, because that's with the first.
If you get it wrong, there will be, absolutely.
Because it'll be
it's
pushing
listening.
back.
It's listening. And it'll just incorporate you into the narrative next time too. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, because with the first dream, I woke up and I try and write down if there's something on my mind when I wake up. So I wrote down after that one, or if there's a lyric or some other extraneous thing that's like really powerful in my mind, I'll write it down. But with that one, I wrote down, until I make the Thoreau video, I will be blocked. Like there will be a blockage. Now the Thoreau video was the first artsy one I had in mind. I ended up actually making that one second. But I was like, I went back and searched my YouTube watch history, and that's when I started watching all these cinematography videos, and that's when that process began. But it was kind of peculiar that there was this, I don't know, had it set itself a task? And I was wondering, is that a creative thing in general? But I guess what you're saying makes perfect sense, is that it's really just, as long as the mind has something to chew on, it's going to keep chewing on it.
Oh, absolutely.
If this is the central problem, it's going to try and figure it out. But I wonder, because it got me thinking about Jung. Now, I read a lot of Jung in my 20s, and what I got from his theory of dreams, aside from obviously the archetypal and the collective and all those different layers and that element, but of his actual working with dreams, was you've got the the intro to like I got the vibe that he was saying every dream has these stages and has the lysis and has that thing, but you're kind of saying, or in your experience, it's been more, there's most of the dreams can be explorations on the thing, but there's some dreams that have the full thing, but it's not common for all of the dreams.
It's a lot like music. You can have variations on the theme, but then ever so often the composer in there will express the full theme, unadulterated. I'm always using musical metaphors. I don't know why, but it just seems to click with people all the time. And now Jung I'm not disagreeing with what Jung is saying, and it sounds like you're talking about his dream seminars in particular. Have you read those?
I'm not sure where I got it from. Probably from the book. There's a collection of his writings on dreams, so it could have been.
It could have been. But if you really want to dive into it, you should read the seminars on dream analysis. There's two. Well, there's really three. There's one big tome, and it's on dreams, and it's just seminars, transcripts of seminars with him and his students. And there's another one on children's dreams, which is also really interesting, very well annotated. Came out in like only 10 years ago or 15 years ago or something.
Right.
Then there's the vision seminars. There's a 2-volume monstrosity.
I think I've gone through those for different pieces of source material.
Yeah. I read that entire thing and it was mind-boggling.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But anyway, those and so that structure that he talks about with the lysis and all that kind of jazz is more towards the big dreams, the archetypal dreams. Most dreams have they'll have a situation and they'll have like some kind of conflict thrown in. These are all like basic narrative rules, by the way, as well. And then you'll have some kind of development and then a possible resolution or not. And if you don't have a resolution, it means the brain is like, I gotta keep working on this, dang it, and so you'll start again in the next dream. Right.
So do you think most dreams will have that search for a resolution?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so
interesting.
They approach it or they aim towards it, but they don't necessarily find it. A lot of times you can have just the same conflict going over and over and over again, around and around and around. You definitely see that in trauma. So classic trauma series is going to be, you have some kind of horrible trauma. Then you have verbatim repeats of the trauma, where it's the same thing, exactly as it happened that you're dreaming about. Then if you progress normally, you'll go from there to, okay, you're still being attacked. It's still dangerous, but it's not in exactly the right setting anymore. What I used to see when I was in the Air Force was guys that would they would start off dreaming about being shelled, and it's something that actually happened to them in Afghanistan. But then they would start dreaming about being shelled in Walmart or being shelled on their way to work, right? So it's not anything that happened anymore. We're not going over a memory anymore. It's engaging in the creative process. And the creative process is taking what has happened, breaking it down into bits and pieces and constructing a new story out of the pieces. So this is where the idea of day residue kind of comes in. Yeah, you'll see day residue in there, but it's usually in little tiny fragments. So you don't have whole memories being played out, except in PTSD. And that's pathological. So now you go from there to, okay, now I'm not being attacked, but I'm getting ready to be attacked. So they'll have those kind of dreams. I'm in Walmart now, and attack is imminent. And so I'm running around and I'm freaking out and I'm trying to figure out. Then they will progress to people are not bombing me or shooting at me. They're hurling insults at me or telling me that I'm worthless and that kind of thing. So it goes from a physical attack to a social attack. And then if all goes well, they'll move on to where the traumatic stuff only pops up every once in a while. And it's not dominating all of your brain power anymore. So that's a normal process.
With therapy that's happening, or do you think that would happen? I guess it doesn't happen naturally. You can get stuck with trauma, right?
Well, okay, so great question. That's the normal healing process, and it happens on its own. You don't necessarily have to do therapy, except when it doesn't happen on its own. So think of it as a wound. Like if a cut happens, your body will heal. But if you add some antibiotic cream and you take care of it and baby it and bandage it and all that kind of stuff, it'll heal a little bit faster. Same idea. So the mind has got its healing mechanism intact. And what it's trying to heal at that point is, I get flooded with all this fight or flight. Whereas before that happened, I was in everything is an okay mode. I don't need all that stuff. And then something bad happens and all of our defensive instincts crank up to 11. That's what I'm trying to heal, is the brain is trying to figure out, okay, do I need that anymore? Am I still under attack? Am I still in danger? Or can I move away from that? Can I shift back to kind of the normal setting of calm, collected, cool? Because I can't function if I'm in fight or flight mode 24/7. On the other hand, I need fight or flight mode. If I really am in danger, it does help you survive. You run away from the things trying to kill you like really fast, or you'll go in full-blown rage mode and just attack whatever it is. And I saw this sometimes in the same person, you would have bouncing back and forth.
It's a good physiological thing to have.
Yeah, and it's very old. It goes way, way.
But it's contextualism. Context is important.
Exactly.
As well,
Context is everything. And this is a great thing that Ernest Hartman wrote about in his book, Dreams and Nightmares, that he was saying that what he noticed in these trauma dream series was that the psyche was trying to build what he called a contextualizing metaphor. And then when I read that, I was really starting to begin my own kind of theorizing, and that stuck with me. And it's not just one metaphor; it's multiple metaphors that the psyche will use. If one doesn't land, it says, "All right, let's scramble up the Etch-a-Sketch and come up with something new that works better." And if you, the therapist, working with somebody like that, are skilled in this, you can come up with the metaphor, and they will grab onto it if it makes sense to them. Yes, that's it. I don't need to dream about this anymore because that's it. That's it. And that's what this mind is doing. It's trying to find that really potent symbolic narrative. And this is...
So I guess it's the map for the territory that you're experiencing. You're looking for because like this is kind of what a narrative is, right? It's like a simplified experience. You're simplifying billions of details of lived experience into like a very convenient set of things. And that's the map that allows us, which I guess is what the mythological thing or the even fantasy and storytelling is kind of about.
It leads right into that discussion exactly of what is fantasy really about? Is it about pure escapism into La La Land? No. It can be. Yes, that's true. But if you've read Sanderson, you know that he's using the fantastical elements to tell a human story about a real lived reality. And any good fantasy author will be doing this consciously or not. Tolkien, for example, he was really trying to process all of the crap that happened to him in World War I and what he saw afterwards. And he's, as a Catholic and a very devout man, he was deeply concerned with the problem of evil. And what do we do with evil? How do we beat it? Can we just whisk it away magically? No. And in fact, The Lord of the Rings is really a very deep meditation on the problem of evil, of what can you really do about it? And his argument is very complex and nuanced and tells us that, well, you can't get rid of it. You're stuck with it. But what do? You can fight it for as long as possible, and eventually, if you hang in there, Providence or Iluvatar or God, being a Catholic, he's basically saying God will provide you with that grace because you earned it. But if you just give in, then you're lost, and that's...
But what does it mean for the One Ring to then be destroyed? Is evil not then gone from... Is he not promising? Is that an eschatological story he's then telling, or what is that?
It's we won for now. It's we won for now because Sauron isn't completely destroyed. He makes a very clear point about that. His spirit wanders off and goes somewhere else to darken some other land, and that someday he'll rise again, and we'll just have to deal with him then. And
I suppose there's the thing of like, Morgoth was supposed to be the end, but then Sauron is left behind, and then what remnant of Sauron, even if it's not his own spectral, I could see there's a continuation there of the...
And
the
he
tale
didn't
of evil.
include, like in some of his letters, he talks about how there was a final battle, the Dagor-Dagorath, where Morgoth is cast away forever, but that's far in the future. But that the Lord of the Rings is really kind of a preamble to the Christian story, where Frodo is the Christ-like figure, but he couldn't quite get to it. He failed.
Right.
He
Yeah.
flat out
Just took Gollum's. Just got lucky.
Yeah. Well, that's providence. That's grace, because Frodo hung in there as long as anyone could be possibly asked to hold on to.
Yeah.
Then God allowed them to win, but that ultimately the evil would rise again, and it would require Christ to actually defeat it.
Okay. So he talked about that somewhere.
In his letters, he talks a little bit about that. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. I've read through all of Middle Earth stuff, like however many times over the years, but I've never done the background reading of like Tolkien, or like gone into his biography and his, other than knowing, I know him and C.S. Lewis had their debates about Christianity, but
Yeah.
yeah. That's really, do you know what? I would love to explore the theme of fantasy more, and perhaps this is a cause for a future conversation, because do you know what? I've seen your book now, and I must see if I can get hold of it, and give it a read, and it would be lovely to chat to you about it another time.
I'll send you a link for it.
Yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing some talk about dreams. There's a million other directions I would love to go with that, so I'm sure we'll save it for a future talk. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, Erik. I have a couple more questions for you. Firstly, so Gary Clark recommended I chat to you as a very interesting person to follow up with. Is there anyone who comes to mind for you as someone interesting that I should maybe sit down and have a chat with?
Yeah, I think you should seek out Stefano Carpani. He's written some very interesting new books on Jung, and just ties it into all kinds of interesting new territory. So I think you'd have a lot of fun talking.
And so, archetypal realm, or what part of Jung is he exploring?
It's like kind of the way in which we view psychoanalysis as a whole, and it's too much to summarize in like one sentence.
Okay, cool.
So much going on with this guy's work. It's fascinating.
It's a grand theme there.
Very
grand. Okay, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much. And last question. You have a YouTube channel, right? Or is there anything you'd like to plug? There's the book.
Yeah.
I'll put them in links in the description.
I'll send you a link for the book for King of the Forgotten Darkness. You can find me on ericgoodwyn.com. That's the easiest way to go. And you can find fiction and nonfiction stuff I've been working on. It's also the only place you can find podcasts of mine.
Okay. Right? That's where you'll find the entire list.
But the YouTube channel is The Imaginarium. I'm also on Instagram as The Imaginarium, and I'm on TikTok as The Imaginarium.
So I was watching a movie and they mentioned what is The Imaginarium?
So that was just the name I came up with for my channel. You're probably thinking about a movie called The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. Is that what you're thinking about?
Oh, it's a Marvel thing.
No, it's definitely not. It's I'm
thinking of Dr.
Terry Gilliam movie, actually. It's really bizarre.
Oh, right.
It's fascinating and strange. It was Heath Ledger's last movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. So The Imaginarium, great name. I like that. It's sticky. It's one of those things you like. It feels very familiar, even if you haven't heard of it before. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Erik, and hopefully we'll be talking again at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to be back.